Okay, so um, we're obviously coming to like it's the new year. You can see here I'm filming this on the 6th of January, and taking a bit of time off interstates. That's why I'm not wearing a shirt. But I thought I'd film this quick video, and it's something I was kind of speaking. So I got a performance coach that I work with, and I chat to him like once a fortnight. And he gave me this framework because I'm sort of coming up on a couple of major decisions personally. So he gave me this framework for how to work through different decisions, and this can kind of be any major decision. Leaving a job, taking a job, doing a university degree, leaving a university degree, starting a business, starting a particular type of business, ending a partnership, starting a partnership. All of those kind of things. They're all major decisions, and obviously they're all going to have a major impact on where you end up 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, and so forth. So it's quite a good framework to kind of work through. So without further ado, I'm going to share it, and I'm going to just talk through some of the key points. So the first one is does this get me closer to my goal? Now, the most important part here is actually figuring out what your goal is. So if you go through this framework and you think, fuck, I don't even know what I'm trying to work towards, then it's going to be really hard for you to actually make any decision because you're not going towards anything. Now, one thing I've found is I think as you get older, and me personally, I'm kind of on the other side of 20s. I know now I have more clarity with what I want than when I did when I was in my early 20s and then when I was in my teen years. Now, this might be different for some people. Maybe some people from a teenager, they knew exactly what they wanted and they're just going towards that. For others, you kind of know directionally what you want, but someone asks you really to get clear, it would be hard to probably describe and articulate it. And I know I fell into that bucket. Now, maybe that was because I just didn't put the work in to actually figure out and try and articulate. But I've personally done a lot of those exercises, but as you do things and you get feedback from the world, that changes. So I don't think there's any issue with, I think a lot of people are scared of getting clear with their goals because they feel like they're going to get locked into a path or something like that. I think there's no reason or there's nothing to really fear because let's say you're shooting towards a particular goal, you start going towards that, you get feedback, and then you think, oh, I'm getting closer to this, but this doesn't feel like the right goal. Then you adjust. The biggest problem is when you're too scared to set any goals through fear of being locked into a path, and then you kind of just aimlessly float and drift. So I think that should be feared more than setting a goal and it being the wrong goal. Okay, it's the wrong goal. Well, you've got feedback on what you don't like and you just go into a different direction. So that's me rambling a little bit, but that's the first thing. And if you're trying to answer, does this get me closer to my goal? You need to actually figure out what your goals are. And this is really important. So assuming that the decision, does get you closer to your goal, the next thing is, do I need to slow down to carefully work through this decision? And a quick framework, and I think it's the Collison brothers or something who created this. I'm not entirely sure, but this is basically the first question you ask yourself whether you need to slow down to carefully work through the decision. So a good one is the decision reversible? This should be probably quickly reversible because most decisions are. But for example, if you get married to someone, is it reversible? Yeah, you just get divorced. But that might take years, lawyer fees, time, emotional strain, all of that thing versus, I don't know, let's say I'm hiring a creative contractor for my e-commerce brand. They're a contractor. If they're not up to scratch, I can probably fire them two days later. So the decision of whether we should hire a contractor or not is something that probably should be made pretty quickly, versus marrying someone, for example. So that is it quickly reversible? If it isn't, then you want to kind of go down these next few steps. How big is the impact, good or bad, right? If this fucks up, what's the impact on the downside? And if this goes well, what's the impact on the good side? So another good way to think about this, again, like let's just use the hiring a contractor because it's nice and easy. Let's say you've got an e-commerce brand, it's doing $1 million a year in revenue and $100,000 or $150,000 in profit. And for you, the contract is going to cost you 5K USD a month or 3K or whatever it is. Let's say 3K for the sake of the example. The downside of hiring the wrong person is probably losing out on the 3K, potentially some of your time and mental energy wasted. And the upside, right? Now, assuming you've done all your due diligence with your hiring and all of that, and you're giving yourself the best chance of hiring the best person or the best contractor or whatever, the upside of that is that maybe this person can transform your business with, a volume of creatives or better execution of creatives or unlocking a new angle or something like that, right? So then you would probably say the impact on the good side is quite high, and then on the downside is quite low. So it sort of makes sense to kind of push forward with that decision. This is an interesting one, and this is something that there's a book. I can't remember the book. It's actually one of the better books I've read. I think it's Dan and Chip Heath. I'm going to pause the video because I think it's a good book. So I found the book. It's called Decisive by Dan and Chip Heath. And they talk about when you're trying to make a crucial decision, the biggest flaw people have in their decision making is not giving themselves enough options. So typically when people make a decision, let's say a really good example would be, I want to drop out of college. And they've just given themselves two decisions: stay in college, drop out. Well, that's probably not going to get you the best outcome. It might, but think of all the other options we have. Go part-time college and start your business. Defer for a year, just take a gap year, just leave for a year, but leave it open where you can come back after a year if your business fails, right? Take 6 months off. Transfer courses to an easier course so you can just continue studying, but, transfer courses to a harder course. Maybe there's something like that, maybe you're doing philosophy and you think, well, I kind of want to learn computer science. It's going to help me with my business. So by giving yourself more and more options, study online, right? There's a lot of options, right? By giving yourself more options, you give yourself more chance of actually picking the best one, as opposed to making things very black and white. I find with probably people who don't think as deeply, it's often very black and white for them. Life's very black and white. Whereas like if you give yourself a lot more options, typically there are things that you haven't thought of. And a lot of the time you can actually go to, if you have a smart group of friends whose opinion you value, go to them, because they'll often have different options that you haven't even thought of, just because their brain might think in a different way, or they've had different life experiences or things like that. The fourth one's the opportunity cost. So this is obviously like a very important framework to think of, because when you're doing something, you're very often not doing something else. So the contractor example, we're spending 3K a month on the creative contractor. That also means I'm not spending, and assuming it's a one-man business where I'm just basically doing everything, it also means I'm not spending 3K a month on hiring a media buyer. It also means I'm not spending 3K a month on ads. It also means I'm not spending 3K a month on improving my product, right? So there's always an opportunity cost. So that's an important frame to think through. It's like, all right, if I go down this decision, what am I not doing as a result? And the opportunity cost gets greater and greater as the decision plays out over time. What would be a good example of this? So probably the best example of this opportunity cost is probably 4 years ago now was when I started in ecom, probably just under 4 years. So yeah, it's been 3 and 9 months or whatever, let's say. Now, the business I started with my friend and business partner was the one that we eventually sold, and also the one that gave us, financial freedom and just a life-changing amount of money, right? Where probably won't ever have to work again and all those, good things. Now, when I was working a job, the last job I had before I quit, the job I had where I actually decided to pursue entrepreneurship, I was making about $80,000 a year. Now, if I continued with that job rather than starting a business, let's say I would have made, 100,000 the next, or 80,000 the next year, and let's say 100 and 100, right? This is Australian dollars, by the way. So let's say 280 before tax. Once the tax man takes a bit, probably like you know, spending, lifestyle, whatever. Let's say I would have had 100,000 Australian saved versus starting my own business, where I've ended up with, with a lot more. And the same could probably be said for the type of business I started, right? So there's always an opportunity cost, and that kind of plays out more and more in compounds as the years go through. So you have to really think this through. It's like, what's the opportunity cost of not doing something, or of doing something? What if I pursue this? What am I not doing? And then if I'm wrong, could I live with the consequences? So this is really important as well, because then that gives you conviction in your decision. Again, the example of me starting my own business, when I was thinking to myself, shit, what if I'm wrong? Okay, I made peace with this. I said to myself, I'm going to give myself at least 2 years, or I'll build it on the side. If I can't figure it out after 2 years, then it was actually two decisions. So let's start with the first one. Just to start a business, I thought to myself, look, what's the downside? Worst case is I lose a bit of money, because I had to pay for Facebook ads. Okay, I lose 20K, 30K. It was probably never going to be any more than that, just because I feel like I would have capped it. But let's say 20, 30, 50K. I thought to myself, I'm going to make that back anyway with a career, and I can just save a little bit more. I can just not spend as much. And over a long enough period of time, I'm going to get that back. But I'm also going to get skills from having tried to start my own business. I didn't have the skill of Facebook ads or paid media or creatives or anything like that. So I was going to add that to my skill bucket. So I was thinking, well, my earning capacity will actually go up. So even if I'm wrong, the outcome is probably better. I'm probably just a more skilled employee, and I can command more in the job market, which will make me more money anyway. So I'm like, all right, well, it makes sense, right, to start the business. So with this decision, it was really easy to go, well, if I'm wrong, I still end up better off than if I didn't do it. So I should make this decision. Slightly different decision when I finally decided to quit my full-time job and run the business full-time, because that was a little bit more where, if the business completely goes bust, there probably is some downside risk. Again, I mapped that out. I thought, okay, let's say the business completely goes bust. I go bankrupt, whatever. Again, I've got the skill set, which we spoke about. So I'm going to better earning capacity. I can always just go back and get a job. I was always a skilled employee. Most people who end up running their own business successfully will be better than 9 out of 10 employees anyway. So I thought to myself, I'm always going to command a job in the job market. Again, I'll be able to make that money back. It might just be a little bit slower. But I felt like I could live with that. So that allowed me to pursue the decision of quitting with full conviction, and made it really easy. I think when you don't go through this process and then you make the decision, it then means you're pursuing that thing or whatever you've decided with 70%, 80% conviction. And that's where there can be issues. Now, let's keep going down. So this is a good one. Is this an asymmetric bet? A low downside risk, high upside potential. A good example of an asymmetric bet would be, let's say I want to test 10 to 15 new business ideas. And each business idea costs me about $2,000 to $3,000 to validate. Now, if I know I've got a 10% hit rate, meaning one of those businesses can be a multi-6-figure profits, multi-7-figure profit a year business, or exit for 7 figures, or multi-7 figures, or 8 or 9, and I know I've got a certain hit rate and a process and all of that, then it makes sense to go through those 15 tests. Because one, I know I've got a sufficient bankroll where even if all 15 of those tests didn't work, I could push out another 15 and it wouldn't, really affect me too much. And it's really just then a game of numbers. And then obviously the expected value, which is like when you kind of multiply all the probabilities of all those things happening over a long enough period of time, it's going to mean I'm up, right? So that's where it's like you run the numbers and you think, okay, well, this just makes sense. The next one's the optionality filter. So this is a really important one. When you do decide to make a decision, you want to go, how can I eliminate some of this risk, right? So a good example might be coming back to the decision of quitting my job. Let's say I was let's say I wanted to limit that downside risk. maybe I can figure out a way with my old employer where I can stay on as a contractor. I'm not a full-time employee, but I'm still working 1 or 2 days a week per hour on a very flexible basis. And, that's kind of covering my wage. That's one way. Another way is you leave on really good terms with your old employer. So if you ever do fuck up, you've got a job there and waiting. That's kind of removing some of the downside risk there, right? Another way you could eliminate downside risk, like let's say you're testing a lot of different ideas, and you're going to need a lot of one idea hits, but you're going to need a lot of capital, and you're thinking to yourself, man, I don't really want to roll all of my personal chips and then some into this idea. Maybe you bring in outside investors, and that limits some of your downside risk while giving you the clarity to be able to run the business to its best capacity. So that's just a couple of options there. Or a couple of examples to explain the optionality filter. Now, this is an important one. Does this lock me into anything? Often decisions can be like, a good example would be, let's say I've decided to go for a $1 billion exit, and I'm building my next software startup, and I'm raising a lot of venture capital, but I'm going to probably need to run this business for the next 10 years. That's a very, very big decision that really should be thought through, because that's like a lock-in decision versus, okay, I'm going to start this agency. Realistically, I'm probably going to be in the day-to-day of the business for 6 to 12 months. But after 12 months, you can probably pretty aggressively work to get yourself out, which means that kind of business still gives you flexibility and optionality. Same with, I want to start an affiliate marketing business. That probably is the biggest optionality because you're just running different offers for different people. An offer doesn't work, you just run the next one. Something gets switched off onto the next. So that's kind of a lens to look at it. Anti-fragility, another really good framework to think of. How can this decision have a low cost with potential unlimited benefits? Similar to the asymmetric bet. Does this decision expose me to the risk of ruin? So that's a good one because it's like, if it does, and there are a number of ways where this can happen, and it's not just through pushing all your personal money into a business idea. Potentially you're in a very high risk space. And if you're opening yourself up to suing or being liable or something like that, maybe again, you can get rid of some of that exposure by spreading your money around, right? It's not always just like, oh yeah, I've got $10 million and I'm just pushing it all into this business. There can be other ways of being ruined. So that's another really good framework to think of and ties into the next question. Can I insure against that risk, which I just spoke about? Now, the final one is, can I solve this problem by cutting instead of adding? And this is, slightly different. This is less of it's more of a problem-solving framework rather than a decision-making framework. So yeah, that's the whole framework. First video for a while. Let me know what you thought. Peace out.